as many of the showers we've seen through this week. A few showers to end the day across perhaps parts of Northern Ireland, the far north of England as well, but across the rest of England and Wales, well, it's looking like a largely fine end to the day. Lots of clear skies, some late sunshine to look forward to as well. Overnight, a bit of a north-south split. Northern areas staying quite blustery, cloudy at times, and a fair bit of showery rain to come as well. Further south, it's a drier, clearer picture, but temperatures for most not really dropping a huge amount. A fairly mild night for many places, generally staying in double figures. Just a few prone spots, some sheltered glens perhaps of Scotland dropping into single digits. And then we stick with that north-south split through into Saturday, cloudier across northern parts, showery outbreaks of rain, perhaps edging a bit further southwards across more northern parts of England through the day, but none of it looks especially heavy. Central southern parts of England and Wales having a largely fine picture, plenty of sunshine, plenty of blue sky, and with that feeling relatively warm, even if temperatures on paper aren't too dissimilar to today. In fact, for some of us, it's going to be a touch fresher. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for making GB News Radio such a huge success. Whether you're in the car, on the go, or listening at home, thank you for choosing us as your radio station.
Good morning, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. On the M4 eastbound, congestion is near junction 33 at Capel Lanilturn. In Durham, the A19 northbound has 10-minute delays between the A181 and the A1086 near Easington, with normal traffic expected between 9:45 and 10 this morning. The A21 southbound in Kent is closed between the A225 and A26 junction due to a vehicle leaving the carriageway. Staffordshire's M6 southbound has one lane closed between junctions 15 and 14 due to a broken down vehicle. And on the trains, major disruption continues on South Western Railway between Bournemouth and Weymouth. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What we're going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics.
First we'll say, welcome to the UK.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Friday the 12th of June, live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
Well, the Prime Minister's leadership is plunged into turmoil once again. Defence Secretary John Healey and the Armed Forces Minister Al Khan's resigned from Sir Keir's government, accusing the Prime Minister of putting Britain into danger by failing to spend the money needed to defend the nation.
Well, speaking to GB News in the last hour, Al Khan's told us why he stepped down from his position.
I resigned for two reasons, really. The first one was I didn't think the funding settlement or the Defence Investment Plan was transformative enough, and the second one was because of the Legacy Act, and I want to make sure that we protect all our armed forces, including our veterans, once they have served. So we've got to get the balance right, but the first principle, unifying role of any government, is to protect the nation, and we need to...
So, will the PM get the message and increase defence spending?
Yes, Sir Keir Starmer's grip on power is looking even shakier this morning after the resignation of arch-loyalist John Healey. He still wants to cling on to his position in Downing Street, but does anyone still think that's realistic? Find out more with me very soon.
Elsewhere, Britain's economy has contracted for the first time in 8 months as ONS data reveals that GDP shrank by 0.1% in April amid surging fuel prices. That's being linked to the war in the Middle East.
Elsewhere, a landmark report has revealed that grooming gang survivors are still being failed by the government, despite Baroness Casey calling for convictions of victims to be quashed last year.
And over the water, Belfast awakens after a third night of protests. It's been revealed that the asylum seeker charged with attempted murder was a policeman in his home country of Sudan.
And an NHS transgender clinic is set to close after a damning report as cross-sex drugs prescribed to 78 children were deemed inappropriate and unsafe. Well, Charlie, what a 24 hours for the government. The resignation of John Healey and then Al Carnes, and resignation on principle. This is not about politics. This wasn't the normal kind of tittle-tattle of Westminster. This is about keeping the country safe.
That's what they're saying. They're both men who have been touted as potential prime ministers. I think perhaps John Healey rather fancies himself as a caretaker PM, and Al Carnes has struggled to hide his own ambition, let's put it that way, when it comes to the top job, with his regular social media posts and rather expensive taxpayer funding on his social media videos
I think that's all part of the job. You're more cynical than me. I think what's really interesting is that both of them said they hardly had sight of this defence investment plan until it was given to them on Monday. And frankly, they're supposed to be in charge of the armed forces. The fact that they didn't get a say over it, it's all been written by the Treasury. I think that's deeply worrying.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Prime Minister's job is First Lord of the Treasury, isn't it? He has to call the shots. They don't like what's being done, and so that's the situation we're in now. Clearly, there's going to be some questions for those in defence, beyond the political side. We just saw the Chief of the Defence Staff, Sir Richard Knighton, leaving Number 10 in the last 10 minutes. I wonder what he might say, if he does say anything. But, you know, serious questions to answer now. Are we ready, not just for the conflicts of the future, but the ones that might happen right now?
And interesting questions for Dan Jarvis, the new Defence Secretary himself. He has a military record, but he's taking over with everybody knowing, the public knowing, the press knowing that the former Defence Secretary thinks there's not enough money in the pot. It's a difficult job for him.
And also, you know, just very quickly, all this focus on defence spending. Interesting to hear Al Carnes talking about the Northern Ireland Legacy Act as one of his reasons for resigning. Northern Ireland obviously central to our conversation at the moment. All the latest protest and anger in Belfast, sparked by that horrific incident on Monday night. Just got back from Northern Ireland myself. We'll be speaking to Doogie Beattie in this programme, but also I imagine try and speak to him about his perspective on the Legacy Act, what that might mean for soldiers and veterans for Northern Ireland and that conflict. But loads to get through today. Please do get in touch, send your views, post your comments. You know the drill by now. It's gbnews.com/your say.
But first of all, here's your 60-second news update with Sophia Wensler.
Charlie, Miriam, thank you and good morning. Your headlines at 9:35. Sir Keir Starmer is facing fresh pressure after Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes followed John Healey in resigning over military funding. Mr Carnes said he could not defend a level of investment he believes is inadequate. John Healey quit as Defence Secretary over the government's Defence Investment Plan. Meanwhile, the newly appointed Defence Secretary Dan Jarvis has arrived in Downing Street this morning, while Sir Keir Starmer has insisted the Defence Plan will provide the resources the military needs. US President Donald Trump has said he cancelled planned strikes on Iran, claiming a deal is now close, saying Iran has agreed it will never have a nuclear weapon. The UK economy contracted by 0.1% in April as household finances began to feel the impact of the Iran war. A 14-year-old girl is due in court today, charged with 3 counts of attempted murder after a knife attack at a school in Manchester. A boy and a girl, both 14, and a 27-year-old male member of staff were stabbed at the Co-op Academy on Plant Hill Road in the Blackley area. Around 1 million young people will be offered the meningitis B vaccine before the new academic year. It follows a series of outbreaks. Those are the headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome. You're watching and listening to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
Now, in the last hour, the former Defence Minister Al Carnes has told GB News that we need to defend our nation properly following his resignation last night.
I've been clear that we need more into defence. I've been clear that the defence investment plan needs to be more transformative. But we've got to be really careful of making sure that the nation can get a good day's work, can get paid for a good day's work, that they can have a secure NHS, they have good schooling, good public services. And a lot of that is not about cutting the things that affect your lives and everybody else's lives on a day-to-day basis. So we've got to get the balance right. But the first principle, unifying role of any government, is to protect the nation. And we need to do that.
Well, Al Carnes called on the government to consider making cuts to welfare to help fund defence, and while failing to rule out a potential bid for the Labour leadership and the keys to number 10.
Well, we're joined in the studio by our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, for more. Olivia, quite a wide-ranging set of responses from Al Carnes there, including some anger, frankly, some frustration, clearly, about the Northern Ireland Legacy Act, which she said was rewriting history.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that was a pretty eviscerating interview from Al Carnes. He is a very, very widely respected minister, former minister in Parliament, as was John Healey. He was an arch-loyalist, a close ally of Keir Starmer's. He was always the man who was wheeled out to the media rounds when the government was in a bit of trouble because he was thought of as a safe pair of hands. And his resignation letter was really, really brutal. He didn't have full sight of the defence investment plan until Monday evening, and it wasn't until Monday evening that he discovered the exact amount of money that was being pledged for defence. That was £10 billion in cash and another £3 billion of sort of treasury trickery, as his people are calling it. Altogether, that £13.5 billion was £4.5 billion short of what he was hoping and expecting and what he says is necessary to keep the country safe. And he decided at that moment on Monday that he just couldn't deal with it anymore and that he was stepping back. People who spoke to him yesterday and the day before in Parliament said that he seemed very cheerful. The weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. You've now got Dan Jarvis taking the role. Pretty poison chalice, I think everyone would agree. Perhaps we are going to hear from him soon. That's what the rumour is. It's almost extraordinary that he has accepted the role in these circumstances. Is he going to accept the defence investment plan as it is? Keir Starmer was intimating yesterday that he does plan to push ahead with it in the exact form that he had planned to go ahead with before Healey resigned. If so, it seems very strange. Essentially, the new Defence Secretary gets no say over the defence investment plan. Or is he going to demand more money? Does he see Keir Starmer now as so weak that he will be able to squeeze a little bit more money out of him? Perhaps, but if that is the case, you've got to wonder why Keir Starmer didn't pledge that money before losing a loyal and helpful minister, two loyal and helpful ministers in the form of Healey and Carnes. If he does pledge more money, it's a bit of a lose-lose, really, for Keir Starmer. If he doesn't pledge more money, you're going to see more and more furious MPs following in the footsteps of Healey and Cairns. If he does promise more money, then there will be big questions about his political judgment. Why did he not promise that money a little bit sooner? Did he not see the political urgency of the situation? Was he not aware that his Defence Secretary the straw was breaking the camel's back and he was about to resign? And if that is the case, that just raises more more and more and more questions.
Well, the weakness of Keir Starmer, as you put it, is the common theme of both Al Khan's resignation letter and John Healey's letter, which was also very, very stinging. And one of the things that John Healey was pointing out was that although it looked like, on paper, the government was committing to much more defence spending, it was all backloaded. It was after the next election. No increase, or very little increase, in this Parliament. And it all points to the fact that Keir Starmer cannot make the cuts to welfare and other areas that he would need to in order to fund further defence. Has he got any chance of doing that under a new Defence Secretary?
Exactly. So what is in the Defence Investment Plan as it stands is defence investment rising to 2.6% of GDP by next year, 2.68% by the year after. I mean, everyone in the military says that it has got to be 3% by yesterday, and it should be 3.5% by 2030. There is this huge question, which Al Khan's raised in that interview with GB News earlier, over what happens with welfare. And actually, there are some signs that those rebels on the back benches who stopped that welfare reform going through last year might now be willing to make a few concessions. But again, that points to the weakness of Keir Starmer. If he can only put in a little bit more money for defence because his backbenchers have deemed it OK to let him have a little bit of wiggle room, that doesn't speak of a strong Prime Minister. And how quickly could he get those welfare reforms through? Not quickly enough for a new defence investment plan to be published before the G7, which is in just a few weeks' time.
And Olivia, some of the criticism we've heard from these two resigning ministers, Al Khan's talking about decisions that should take days, taking months. And that points to precisely the crisis they'll have now. If they're going to win over those backbenchers who have frustrated not just this plan, but so many other government plans with their failing to back down on the welfare reforms, how likely is it that Sir Keir Starmer suddenly will discover the ability to make decisions quickly and urgently and directed in this way?
Well, it seems unlikely. There were allies of John Healey who said that urgent decisions about the Defence Investment Plan were put on Keir Starmer's desk in May, weeks and weeks ago, and there was just no decision made. Again, it speaks to Keir Starmer, as his critics say, just clinging on to process, clinging on to the way things should be done, to step-by-step analysis, rather than making those quick political decisions which are needed for a Prime Minister. It is a really, really shaky position for Keir Starmer to be in. What's quite interesting is that actually none of the potential successors to Keir Starmer as the next Prime Minister seem to have put defence at the very top of their brief. So even if Keir Starmer does go in the next few months, it's not at all clear that the country or the military will be in a better position.
Do you think, though, Olivia, this could actually wake up Labour backbenchers to the peril that we're in? You know, we've got senior members of the armed forces, actually NATO allies also worried about the UK's position, worried about the lack of defence capability. Could this actually be a wake-up call for those Labour MPs to reassess their view on welfare spending, for example?
I think the problem is that in the minds of some of these backbench MPs, yes, defence spending is a problem. Yes, money needs to be spent. But they also think that welfare spending is so important that the answer is to raise taxes or to borrow more. They simply think that more money needs to be found. Now, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have painted themselves into a corner on this because they said in their manifesto that they wouldn't be raising the three major taxes on working people, national insurance, income tax or VAT. So where do they go from here? Yes, backbenchers will say more money needs to be spent on defence, but they won't want to see cuts elsewhere. And the option of tax rises has essentially been put off the table. It puts the Treasury and the Prime Minister in a very, very awkward position.
And us and the country and defence in a pretty tough place as well, right? Olivia, thank you very much for your analysis this morning.
Well, let's speak now to the former Army officer Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. Hamish, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. You've written a piece in the Telegraph this morning praising, actually, Al Khan's and John Healey for their principled stance, but also calling for Army generals to follow them out of the door. Why do you think they should also resign?
Well, good morning. Thanks very much for having me. And yeah, this is a crucial debate. I think the two most principled and honourable members of the cabinet have now gone. And what, in essence, members of the armed forces have felt completely let down. The government, first of all, do the strategic defence review, which I personally think is a really good look at what capability we need now and in future. And the Defence Investment Plan is supposed to fund it, although, as we've heard, and as Al Kearns and John Healey have said, it falls well below what it is. I think when it comes to responsibility, certainly some of the senior members in the MOD should also really show that they really care about the men and women who are in our armed forces, who are prepared to fight for this country. But, what is terribly sad is it would appear that the government is not prepared to fund it. And we are in such a dangerous position at the moment, not just Russia, but what we're seeing in Iran. And of course, the terrorist threat is still very much bubbling away. I think it is a good move. Hopefully, with Healey and Al Kearns falling on their swords, it might convince the Prime Minister that funding defence is absolutely essential. And whether it comes from Ed Miliband's net zero bonanza or from the welfare budget, it's got to come. We have got to defend this country. This is the most important thing that the government can do. And quite frankly, if it can't do it, then perhaps they should step aside and let somebody else get on with it.
Hamish, obviously there's so much focus on defence spending, the technology required, innovation, bombers, bullets, tanks, all the rest of it. But another criticism that Al Kearns made, which I think is perhaps being overlooked, is that in his interview with GB News this morning, he spoke about the Northern Ireland Legacy Act rewriting history. He said that it was creating a hierarchy of truth in Northern Ireland. And he's been accused by lots of veterans, Al Kearns, of not speaking out about this issue. I think he failed to vote on this bill when it was in Parliament, didn't attend, points to perhaps his personal misgivings with it, but didn't take the stand then on that issue. He is now. What might happen to this act as a consequence of his intervention? What do you want to happen next?
Well, I think he's absolutely right. And the Northern Ireland Legacy Act and the hounding of British Special Forces is, again, another detriment that seems to be led by the current government, the Labour government, against the military. And of course, we in the military, and when I was in the military, were absolutely not above the law and try and follow it to the letter as we can. But as Al Kearns will know as well as anybody else, when your hair's been parted by an enemy bullet, sometimes the Human Rights Act is not the first thing that you think of. And when you come to the Legacy Act, it's just not balanced. It's not fair. Why should IRA terrorists be allowed to get scot-free, whereas we're hounding soldiers who are trying to defend civilians and trying to stop terrorist acts happening? So, Al, maybe he's come a bit late to this party, but he will, as a Special Forces operative himself, will absolutely understand this. And at the end of the day, it's all about the men and women who defend this country. We have got to make sure that they have everything they need to defend it. And also, we've got to make sure that they're not going to be hounded by human rights lawyers for things that happen on the battlefield. The battlefield is a very different place from the sort of leafy lanes of Westminster.
Well, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, thank you very much for your time this morning. Well, coming up next, Baroness Casey says that children who were groomed, sexually abused and then prosecuted for crimes are still being failed.
But first, we'll be discussing the perilous state of Britain's economy. GDP has contracted for the first time in 8 months. And if you want to get away from all of it, here's the Holiday Sun forecast.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Looking ahead to the weekend and across much of southern Europe, the weather's looking largely fine. Not totally dry, however. Across some parts of Greece, especially towards the south and around some of the Greek islands, there will be some showery outbreaks of rain around. 1 or 2 showers across parts of Italy, otherwise largely dry. Largely dry for much of Spain, just towards the west. Outbreaks of rain, these affecting Portugal too, but towards Madeira and the Canary Islands, it's looking dry here. More fine and at times hot weather to come into next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
You're a stripper for nearly 20 years now.
Yeah.
And what you do now has changed. How has it changed and why?
I think beforehand they would book you individually. There would be a lot of stripograms, and that would be bookings for like birthdays, hen parties, and ultimately you would probably be around their house or something like that, or in a small bar. What it's kind of moved into now is more shows. Dream Boys, it's really popular. It's up and down the country, and what you'll find is they'll get 20, 30 girls together and they'll go out and they'll go to the show because they've got the drag queen, they've got the dancers, they've got the stripper, they've got the whole night's entertainment.
Is that because they feel uncomfortable with the stripper, or is it a woke thing? Is it they're concerned about objectifying you because they don't want to objectify themselves, so why should you be objectified?
I think it could be possibly a bit about... some of them might think if we get them around the house, there might be a person that's uncomfortable with it. Whereas if they book the show, you're free to go to the show or not.
GB News, the People's Channel. GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Princess Anne and the way that she has brought up her family is really interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, you've got daughter and son who've not taken on royal titles, who've just got on with their lives.
I think now, in retrospect, we can say it was an inspired decision of the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, not to have her husband receive a Grand Peerage title, which meant, of course, that her children would just be plain Mr. and Mrs. Zara is Mrs. Tyndall, he is Mr. Phillips, and that's allowed them actually to have a much more normal life, not being in the necessary glare that attaches when you have the HRH prefix to your name and become a duke or a duchess or whatever. And yes, they have had great lives in the private sector.
GB News, the People's Channel. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Dorothea served in preparation for D-Day. And Dorothea, how does it feel being here today, joining other veterans?
We suddenly felt that it had been worthwhile giving up our youth, our years as teenagers. No such things existed. You were a child until you were 14 or 16, depending on the year. And after that, OK, you're fit to be killed for the country. And it was naturally assumed that everybody would willingly do their bit for England. And they would have.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 7 minutes 10. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Now, Britain's economy has shrunk for the first time since last August as the impact of the Iran war starts to hit home.
Yes, GDP, it's fallen by 0.1% in April as cancelled sporting events in the Middle East hit the services sector, while soaring petrol and diesel prices dragged down retail sales.
Well, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, admits the conflict is having an impact, but could Britain now be heading for a recession? Well, shall we speak to political and economic media commentator Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Not good news on paper, but I'm always very sceptical about these figures. 0.1%, well within a rounding error. Is this really a contraction or just a different way of measuring things?
Yeah, so it's the first estimate from the Office for National Statistics. So there may be some subsequent revisions in future months, but I think what the figures need to be read into the wider context of a range of economic indicators. So if we look at the April figure itself, we have seen borrowing in April above the OBR forecast. I think it's over 24 billion that was borrowed. We've seen significant job losses in the month of April as well, and we've got significant year-on-year job losses. And March to April, there was a number of job losses there as well. So you've got to look at it in the round of all the economic indicators, which whilst the Iran war is having an effect, because obviously the cost of the pumps and some of the imports would have gone up as part of that, the underlying challenges in the economy aren't going away. We've been trundling along now for several months with very little to no growth overall. I think it's up by 1.2% on the year. So you're right to think, treat a bit of caution on this. But it's the start of the Chancellor's new fiscal year, April. So having a slight decline in the economic figures is not a great start as we go into the new fiscal year.
Jamie, I'm really sorry. We've only got a minute left, so quite quick with this one. Do you think that the British economy is proofed for these sorts of incidents in terms of net zero, our preparedness as an economy, or are we left pretty susceptible to these shocks?
Yeah, well, ultimately, what you've got is, if we want to get the economy growing, we need to get either taxes down or more money into consumers' pockets. So the fact that our energy prices are so high, and that's partly to do with the government's net zero policy, this government and the previous government, the best tax cut or more money into consumers' pockets you could have is to make energy cheaper. And if we don't get energy cheaper, we are going to be susceptible to all of these shocks sort of globally. So I think that's the kind of the area the government needs to focus on. Tax cuts would be great, but getting more money into households with lower energy prices will stimulate the economy.
OK. Jamie Jenkins, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Well, still ahead on Britain's Newsroom, an NHS transgender clinic is set to close after a damning report found that cross-sex drugs were being prescribed to 78 children.
We'll also be crossing over to speak to Doogie Beattie in Belfast for all the latest there. You're watching Britain's Newsroom, Britain's favourite morning show, only on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for the thousands of you who are becoming friends of GB News each and every week.
Good morning. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. On the M4 eastbound at junction 33 near Capel Lanilturn, congestion is due to an incident restricting 3 lanes. On the A19 northbound in Durham, a broken-down vehicle is blocking 1 lane. Normal traffic is expected by 10:15. In Kent, on the A21 southbound, an accident closed 1 lane between the A225 and the A26 after a vehicle left the carriageway. Normal conditions are expected by 11:45. And on the trains, major disruption on South Western Railway between Bournemouth and Weymouth. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
£76,543 and 21 pence in tax-free cash could be yours this summer. That's totally tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. And remember, because it's totally tax-free cash, you'll get to keep every single penny for a chance to win. Text cash to 63225. 1 entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB21 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 26th of June. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
At the stroke of midnight, the news doesn't stop, and neither do we.
Day in, day out. Forget stuffy late night TV shows. We're giving you a front row ticket to the centre of the political universe.
Because breaking news doesn't wait for the morning.
And neither do we. Join us for one of the most controversial and volatile times of politics in human history.
A very big story.
Big story over here.
You won't get this anywhere else. The Late Show live at midnight, every night.
Only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Friday the 12th of June. We're live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
Well, the Prime Minister's leadership is plunged into turmoil once again.
The Defence Secretary John Healey and the Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes both resigned from Sir Keir Starmer's government, accusing the Prime Minister of putting Britain in danger by failing to spend the money needed to defend the nation.
Well, speaking to GB News in the last hour, Al Carnes told us why he stepped down from his position.
I resigned for 2 reasons, really. The first one was I didn't think the funding settlement or the defence investment plan was transformative enough. And the second one was because of the Legacy Act. And I want to make sure that we protect all our armed forces, including our veterans, once they have served. So we've got to get the balance right. But the first principle, unifying role of any government, is to protect the nation. And we need to do that properly.
So, will the PM get the message and increase defence spending?
Elsewhere, Belfast awakens after a third night of protests, and that's come as it's been revealed that the asylum seeker charged with attempted murder on Monday night was a policeman in his home country of Sudan.
Yes, after 2 nights of serious violence, Belfast gets back to some sort of normality. But the questions around the asylum seeker and that attack still linger, and people want to know what is going to be done about the porous border between the EU and the UK. We'll have more throughout the programme.
And Britain's economy has contracted for the first time in 8 months. An ONS survey reveals that GDP shrank by 0.1% in April amid surging fuel prices linked to the Iran war.
Elsewhere, Baroness Casey has expressed frustration as children who were groomed, sexually abused and then prosecuted for crimes are still being failed 1 year after her landmark report.
And an NHS transgender clinic is set to close after a damning report found that cross-sex drugs prescribed to 78 children were inappropriate and unsafe. Well, Charlie, you've just got back from a few days in Northern Ireland covering those protests, those riots. We're going to be speaking to Doogie Beattie in a minute. What was your reflection on your time there?
Well, firstly, I mean, it was just great to speak to so many people while we were there. Many of them, of course, engaged in disorder, but still willing to speak to us and share their perspectives. Some less keen to see journalists, speak to journalists. Quite a few hairy moments, we put it that way, on the streets of East Belfast and also in Glengormley a couple of nights ago, about 13 kilometres out of the city. But there are plenty of people who wanted to speak to GB News, wanted to speak to the press about why they were angry, and even if they weren't taking part in the disorder as well, some people said they still supported that violent action because they felt it was the only way they were being heard. And I suppose the key thing I took away was listening to the political discussion going on at the same time. It felt as though a lot of people were skirting around the cause of that anger and that violence. A lot of it descended into racist hate. There's no denying that at all. But many people there did have a serious political point to make. A lot of them weren't getting involved in rioting or disorder. But I felt as though the conversation was about social media, toxicity, Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, Elon Musk. What have they got to do with East Belfast? It was totally missing from the frustrations I heard on the ground. I was a bit, I don't know, miffed by that, I suppose.
It's also interesting from your coverage looking at the different ways that Northern Ireland is policed compared to mainland Great Britain. And even after some of those extraordinary scenes of violence and arson, you were able to essentially walk through a crime scene the morning after because police still had not been to those areas.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously very organised there in Northern Ireland. They know how and when to react to certain levels of disorder. Often they just thought, if we stay away, that's better for this situation. Yeah. It'll get worse if we get involved. But it was very strange. I mean, 3 mornings there of going to burnt-out buildings, destroyed cars, and the only people we saw on the street were sort of street sweepers, people cleaning up some of the damage, and then the police would turn up, take a few photos and leave, perhaps because the police service was so stretched there. The Chief Constable very much saying that they need more support, and I think we saw a lot of that in the acts that were playing out while we were there. The fire service regularly driving past fires. Yeah. I mean, that shouldn't happen, should it?
Extraordinary. Well, we will have the latest with Doogie Beattie very shortly, but of course do send your views and comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say.
First, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia Winslow.
Charlie, Miriam, thank you and good morning. It's just gone 10 o'clock. Your top stories this hour. Sir Keir Starmer is facing fresh pressure after Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes followed John Healey in resigning over military funding. The former Defence Minister said he could not defend a level of investment he believes is inadequate to the threat Britain faces. Speaking to GB News this morning, Mr Carnes said the first priority of the government should always be to protect the nation.
I resigned for 2 reasons, really. The first one was I didn't think the funding settlement or the defence investment plan was transformative enough. And the second one was because of the Legacy Act. And I want to make sure that we protect all our armed forces, including our veterans, once they have served.
John Healey had already resigned as Defence Secretary, accusing the Prime Minister and Treasury of failing to properly fund the Defence Investment Plan. Number 10 has appointed Dan Jarvis as the new Defence Secretary. He was seen arriving at Downing Street this morning, while Sir Keir Starmer has insisted the Defence Plan will provide the resources the military needs. Reports have since emerged that the reason for capping defence spending is the government's commitment to net zero spending and the ballooning benefits bill. Meanwhile, the Conservatives have criticised the government's defence plans. Writing in The Telegraph, Tom Tugendhat accused Sir Keir Starmer of choosing welfare over defence. The former Tory Security Minister told GB News this morning that the resignations are no surprise.
Effectively, what the Prime Minister did was he asked the Defence Secretary, he asked the Minister of Armed Forces, Al Khans, to preside over the death of the Royal Navy, and they both said no.
And Reform UK have also taken aim at the Labour government over the plans. The party's deputy leader, Richard Tice, said the resignation letters are damning.
It's deeply shocking, and when you read their two resignation letters, it's even more shocking. John Healey, he said that the Prime Minister was unable, brackets, in other words, he's a puppet, close brackets, is what he meant, and the Chancellor is unwilling to fund what is necessary to keep us safe. You look at Al Khans' letter, it's even more devastating. He said that it's essentially, it's been prepared for the last war, not the next war, that it's completely unfit for purpose, it's not built for the threat we face, and he said we're not a serious country.
But Labour's Peter Kyle has defended Sir Keir Starmer on defence.
Taken difficult decisions all the way through government to get to this point. Don't forget the first resignation last year from Cabinet was because we switched spending from overseas aid into the defence budget. We have taken these difficult decisions. Keir Starmer has taken these difficult decisions, even though he knows it's challenging for some people, but he has not deviated from delivering the defence and security circumstances that our country deserves in the moment we're living in.
Donald Trump has said he cancelled planned strikes on Iran after claiming a deal is now close. The US president said documents could be signed within days and that Iran has agreed it will never have a nuclear weapon. He says the Strait of Hormuz would reopen once any agreement is signed. It comes after the US confirmed strikes on several ships accused of transporting Iranian oil. However, Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Bagheri told State TV that reports of an agreement were speculative and nothing has been finalised. The economy shrank in April as household finances began to feel the impact of the Iran war. The UK's gross domestic product contracted by 0.1% during the month, according to the Office for National Statistics. It's the first time the economy has contracted since last August and is a sharp pullback from growth of 0.3% in March and 0.4% in February. Chancellor Rachel Reeves acknowledged the war in the Middle East was hitting the economy, saying this is not a war we wanted or joined, but one that will have an impact at home. Protests in Northern Ireland passed peacefully last night after 2 days of unrest, sparked by the stabbing of Stephen Ogilvie by a Sudanese man. The police service of Northern Ireland said extra officers, including mutual aid officers from other UK forces, had been deployed across Northern Ireland last night amid concerns about further violence. 30-year-old Hadi Al-Adid appeared in court on Wednesday, charged with the attempted murder of 44-year-old Mr Ogilvie, who lost an eye and suffered injuries to his back and head in the attack. A 14-year-old girl is due in court today, charged with 3 counts of attempted murder after a knife attack at a school in Manchester. A boy and girl, both aged 14, and a 27-year-old male member of staff were stabbed at the Co-op Academy on Plant Hill Road in the Blakely area. Around 1 million young people will be offered the meningitis B vaccine before the new academic year. The programme will cover Year 13 pupils as well as people under 25 starting university or some residential further education courses this autumn. They'll be offered in 2 doses, with the first from July and the second in August. The government says it is now acting as a series of outbreaks, including the one in Kent earlier this year, which left 2 teenagers dead. Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'll have more for you in half an hour.
Thanks, Sophia, and welcome to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
And of course, we'd love to know what you think about all the topics we're discussing today. Send your comments to gbnews.com/your say.
Should say I've had a couple from Daryl and Ken complaining about me referring to Glen Gormley being 13 kilometres northwest of Belfast. I should of course be saying 8 miles.
Do you know who else complained about that yesterday?
Who?
Andrew Pearce.
Makes for a change.
I know what a kilometre is. I think we're moving that way.
I can
People
do both.
may not like it.
I can do both. Daryl and Ken, we'll do miles this hour, kilometres next.
We want Fahrenheit and centigrade in the weather forecast.
OK, let's not get carried away. It's just strictly Celsius for me, please.
Absolutely. Well, on to our top story today. In the last hour, the former Defence Minister Al Carnes has told GB News that we need to defend our nation properly, following his resignation last night.
I've been clear that we need more into defence. I've been clear that the defence investment plan needs to be more transformative. But we've got to be really careful of making sure that the nation can get a good day's work, can get paid for a good day's work, that they can have a secure NHS, they have good schooling, good public services. And a lot of that is not about cutting the things that affect your lives and everybody else's lives on a day-to-day basis. So we've got to get the balance right. But the first principle, unifying role of any government, is to protect the nation. And we need to do that properly.
The former minister called on the government to consider making cuts to welfare to help fund defence. He also failed to rule out a potential bid for the Labour leadership and the keys to number 10.
And in the last few moments, the Prime Minister has met with the new Defence Secretary, Dan Jarvis, at Downing Street.
Well, let's speak to the Senior Associate Fellow of the Henry Jackson Society, Andrew Fox. Andrew, of course, first, congratulations. You are a former member of the Parachute Regiment and you've got one of your own in the top job now as Defence Secretary. What will be the big challenges that Dan Jarvis will face and how do you think he can overcome them?
Yeah, it's great news for the regiment, and we're all proud of Dan today for making it to the very top job. I think the most challenging thing here is going to be dealing with the Treasury and finding the money that's needed. Now, there is something I think that the Treasury do have a point in, and that is that we do have the 6th biggest defence budget in the world. And yet we in no way have the 6th most capable military, which I think suggests to wider structural problems within the Ministry of Defence, how they spend the money they're given. So I think that needs looking at. But in the short term, we don't have what we need right now. What we do have is a bunch of very, very high-end niche capabilities that will deliver effect, but they're not fit, as Al Khan said, for the war that we're going to face. They're fit for the world as it is, or as it was yesterday.
Now, these arguments about procurement, about what the money should be spent on, have been going on for some time. Dominic Cummings, the former number 10 advisor, has been tweeting profusely about this issue over the last 24 hours. And he says that the military, that those in charge of the budget are just spending the money on the wrong items, that they're not prepared for the kind of war of attrition, for example, that we're seeing in Ukraine. How do you think the Ministry of Defence, the armed forces, should be better spending this money to prepare us for the kind of wars we might face in the future?
Well, it's the way we do procurement. At the moment, what we're throwing our money at is really high-end, kind of boutique, top-of-the-range stuff, like aircraft carriers, or if you look at the money that's gone into Ajax, the reason Ajax is so complicated, that's the Army's new armoured fighting vehicle. The reason it's so complicated is because we've bolted on literally everything you could possibly think of that you might need for combat going forward. Now, if we look at what's happening in Ukraine, and to a certain extent with the IDF in Lebanon, what they're seeing is these very expensive bits of equipment are being taken off the battlefield by $500 drones. And that clearly is unsustainable. If we look at the Gulf states, they were having to spend expensive missile interceptors, the Patriot missile, to shoot down, again, these incredibly cheap drones. So we need to think about how we do this differently. We need to look at how we can make equipment that's not out of date before it comes into service, but stays within sort of the cost envelope of the budget that we're given. And that's incredibly tricky to do because defence traditionally has never thought that way, and it requires a mindset change.
And just finally, Andrew, also Al Khan gave 2 reasons for his resignation. That's about funding, but also about the Northern Ireland Legacy Act and the investigations going into veterans there, you know, sometimes several decades after the operations they served on. That is critical to the concern and anger being felt among the armed forces community at the moment as well.
That's right. And look, nobody's saying that soldiers should be given a free pass on operations to commit crimes or anything like that. But there is a certain bar for justice that's just not being met when it comes to these legacy cases, dragging men in their 70s through the courts for things that happened decades ago. It just isn't. It isn't justice, especially when the other side have been given letters of comfort and free passes for the horrible terrorist crimes that they committed. There's a real double standard here, and it's great. And it's taken Al some time to call this out. He did miss the vote rather than vote against it.
Yeah.
But it's great to see that he's finally speaking out against it, and hopefully that will be the first step in stopping this persecution of our veterans.
Well, Andrew Fox from the Henry Jackson Society, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Right, speaking of Northern Ireland, calm has yet to fully return to Belfast after 3 nights of unrest that left numerous properties damaged or destroyed, by 5 also seen over a dozen police officers injured.
Well, police made 16 arrests during the second night of disorder, with 2 people charged so far, including a 24-year-old woman charged with disorderly behaviour.
Well, the Northern Ireland Secretary Hilary Benn has warned that those responsible for the violence will face the full force of the law. Well, let's cross over now to our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, who's in Belfast for us. Dougie, lots of conversation at the moment about the disorder and the justice that might follow in reaction to it. It seems as though the conversation has moved away from the cause of so much of that anger.
Well, it has, Charlie, and people are now saying that they will watch that there will not be 2-tier justice in Northern Ireland. Those that were out on the streets actually getting harder sentences than many others. So that will be one to watch. But really, Charlie, you were on the ground with me here. It was quite vicious in places, sporadic in others. There was no real organisation by paramilitaries or anything at this. Actually, the Deputy Chief Constable, or Assistant Chief Constable, yesterday confirming that. And it's just born out of real frustration here. But today, Northern Ireland is pretty much back to normal. You can see the big sightseeing buses, tourists in the high street, everything, shops opening. And this is part of this, because if we look at the bill that it has taken, 200 officers to come in from other regions, probably of a bill of about close to £1 million. Then you have 2 nights of violence, probably £1 million each night on policing. Then you have the businesses that were shut. 2 cruise ships come in here in those first 2 nights and didn't let anybody off the boats. These businesses have lost a lot of money. I think we could safely say that the bill in real terms will be up in around £8 million. That's how much those 2 nights of ratting have cost. And of course that has to be found out of Northern Ireland's block grant. So really politicians need to look at what is wrong here, and most of that is over illegal immigration, but where they are being put into those working classes, socially deprived areas, and that is where the violence is breaking out. You and I watched it, and then you go to places like Glengormley, which is pretty middle class, and you see the frustration gathering there over an asylum centre just up the road, where there's been protests every Sunday for the last few months. So politicians here need to take a look today. They've got the breathing space to do that. Will they react to it? And of course, today the Republic of Ireland now goes into not controlling its own borders, because the EU take over today, and the Republic and the Republic of Ireland are being told that they now must take whatever the EU tells them in their quota, and that will cause problems in the south of Ireland. I would expect within the next 8 to 10 days you will see real pushback against that. And of course people here and in the south are saying, yes, we want a border, but not a hard border, but some sort of electronic border, just in order to know who exactly is in your country. We found out where this man came from that allegedly carried out this attack. We know what he did as a job, strange enough, a policeman in Sudan, which is very strange. But we didn't even know he was here in real terms. We don't know how many people's coming in and out of the country. And of course they can cross from here on a ferry, on a plane, straight into Great Britain, and you've no need for a rubber boat. So if those politicians do not get serious in this breathing space here now and start to talk to these communities and start to look at where they're putting these people, it is just a sticking plaster. It will erupt again. And really what has saved them last night was there was very heavy rain in Belfast all day yesterday and last night. And this might sound stupid, Charlie, but the World Cup started last night, and big sporting events really do take young men off the streets. We wait to see what happens this evening. Hopefully, Northern Ireland will be in for a quiet weekend.
Thank you, Doogie. Doesn't sound stupid to me at all, for what it's worth. And I have to say, fond memories of that lovely Belfast downpour we both enjoyed yesterday. Good to speak to you, Doogie. Cross back to you later.
Really interesting, this border question, isn't it? The government's already shut it down, saying they're just going to step up efforts to deport illegal immigrants, but without looking at who's coming over and who's going back, very difficult to provide that security.
Yep, very few politicians in Northern Ireland having that political discussion right now, and I think that's to cause a lot of frustration among people across several communities. Obviously, the Loyalists much louder at the moment, but we spoke to plenty of Catholics, not on camera, funnily enough, when they saw what was going on around them, who said, you know, quietly, privately, we agree with their anger as well. We're not going to set fire to wheelie bins to express our anger, but we really do want things to change on that situation as well. I know they might have different views on the border, but they certainly are concerned about who might be coming in to the province and where they're coming from.
Interesting. Well, moving on now, and it's time for our Great British Giveaway. Time is ticking on your chance to win our big cash prize of £76,543 and 21 pence. Here's how you do it.
There's just 2 weeks left to make your summer sensational, as we're giving you the chance to win a simply stunning £76,543 and 21 pence in tax-free cash. That's cash that could go towards family treats, spectacular summer days out, or give you the chance to chill out and relax somewhere like here, the Imperial Island Resort in Paphos. You really could be our next big winner with a whopping £76,543 and 21 pence in your bank. But hurry, there's just 2 weeks remaining.
For a chance to win £76,543 and 21 pence in tax-free cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB21 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 26th of June. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pulled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Yes, good luck, folks. Right, up next, it's uncertain times for the Prime Minister following the dramatic resignations of the Defence Secretary John Healey and the Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes. Will the PM last? We shall see.
Well, we'll be going through that and much more with Jonathan List and Mark Field. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
He looks like he's giving him a lecture on how to dress right now. It's very smart. All right, see you both after the break.
Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that, because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
We can allow.
Stop.
You think we can allow?
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. It's 10:27 when you're watching Britain's Newsroom with Charlie and Miriam.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by journalist and commentator Jonathan Liss and the former Foreign Office Minister Mark Field. Welcome to you both. Good morning. Mark, shall we start with the political turmoil, this incredible double resignation, John Healey, Al Khan's, really calling into question whether or not the UK can defend itself?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very serious. But I have to say, just taking one further step back, I mean, you see a lot of the preening generals berating the bean counters at the Treasury. I mean, the Treasury have got a point. We look at the appalling waste, going back 20 years, this is not a recent phenomenon, appalling waste in relation to procurement, whether it's the Ajax helicopters, the whole range of different contracts, almost all of which have gone over value. And there has been a sense the Treasury are trying to keep a handle on defence costs. And my biggest worry has been that actually it's already well splurging a whole lot of money towards defence, but if it is going to be as badly handled as all the other procurement problems we've had in the past, we've got some real problems on our hands. Yeah. And so, you look at what, for example, in a place like Swindon, we have got a huge amount of new work going on with state-of-the-art drones, which are literally improving on a month-by-month basis. So, we are putting money into modern warfare, but we do need to get the numbers up in both the Navy and the Army.
I suppose that's a key point, isn't it, Jonathan? Lots of frustration about the cost of these big legacy projects. I think about these aircraft carriers haven't been deployed properly yet with the full complement of jets that they can carry. All this discussion about Ajax that Mark was just referring to, but the key kit and equipment, which is changing the battlefield now, drones, we're just not really in the conversation on a level we need to be.
But isn't that really the point of all of these conversations about spending? Ultimately, throwing money at something is, you can buy anything. Yeah. It's about what you spend. It's about spending smart, not spending more. So that's the bit that sort of interested me, I suppose, from Healey's resignation, was that he was complaining about the numbers in the letter. He was complaining about the fact that the investment plan was talking about getting to 2.68% of GDP by 2030, where he wanted 3%. But he knows perfectly well that those numbers, you could spend 3% GDP and still not get the capacity you need. And I suppose another bit of this conversation that he was alluding to in his letter was also about how we, work with our European partners, because one thing that the EU did and does very well is pooling capacity. And you have programmes like the CSDP and PESCO, which the UK opted out of. Well, the UK was actually part of the CSDP very strongly, but opted out of PESCO. PESCO is all about not duplicating your capability. So if you're all buying this expensive equipment, why don't you save money by buying it? Because you're not going to go to war with each other. And that's not just about sort of military hardware, it's also about sort of cyber security and all this stuff, which is actually incredibly important now for national security and national infrastructure. So there are all kinds of conversations we can have around the sides. But politically, obviously, this resignation was devastating for Starmer, because he has said correctly that the most important priority of any Prime Minister is to keep people safe. And if your own Defence Secretary, who is well respected across the board, basically says that you're not doing that, then that gives you a lot of political problems. But on the other hand, you do have to take a step back and say, well, a Prime Minister is not just the overseer of defence, but of all the other priorities that you have across the board. And if you take money from one thing or put extra money into one thing, where's that money going to?
Well, that's true. That's a very good point. And Mark, taking aside the question of whether or not the money is well spent, it's not as if the government has been afraid to spend money in other areas. I was just looking at the figures this morning. Since Labour came to power, £13 billion increase for the NHS, £7 billion increase for PIP, personal independent payments, £25 billion more a year on debt interest.
No,
the fact that they're penny pinching over defence is a message in itself.
No, you're absolutely right, and they haven't. I mean, again, it's a failure. It's a political failure. I mean, and I say this goes back to the Tory time as well. Both MOD officials, but actually also a succession of defence ministers who've not been able to make a robust enough case to make sure that we do spend more. And I think one of the difficulties as well that you see is these fast-moving figures, whether it's 2.8%, 3%, depending upon what gets added into it. But whichever way you look at it, given the importance of the defence of the realm, given the very difficult world we're living in, and that is fast-changing. As I say, it's not just drone warfare, but obviously what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East. The very idea that we... listen, let's be honest, we grew up, I grew up at least 40 years ago, when we went down to the Falklands. We wouldn't have a hope with our current Navy of being able to reclaim the Falklands if a similar episode happened today. We've got the smallest standing army now since the time of Waterloo in the Napoleonic Wars. We are a very, very pale shadow. We're no longer a Premier League nation on defence. We have a great history and we can talk a good game, but I'm afraid we're just not delivering on that. And it's not, and it isn't, as I say, it is partly about the money, but it's more to the issue is where is the commitment? Where is the political commitment? And I'm afraid many, many MPs take a view it's far easier to make a case for more welfare, for more health spending, not for...
Yeah, but also it's about the grandstanding over things like Trident. When we're talking about the new forms of warfare, very few people are talking about the possibility of entering a nuclear conflict, but we are talking about the hybrid forms of warfare and the unconventional cyber, etc. And you see that on the battlefield right now in Ukraine, I suppose increasingly in Iran as well, where you do have nuclear powers that are engaged, but we're not seeing any sort of threat of nuclear weapons from Israel or the United States so far, thank goodness, or Russia for that matter. So that's something that we, in the long term, we need to think not just in terms of prestige and grandeur and our place in the world, which has led to things like Trident, but also how we actually defend ourselves and what might happen with hostile actors, both state and non-state, quite near our shores, actually, in the next few years.
But the fundamental political point, I mean, obviously we can talk about, the personalities involved and what it means for Starmer, but it's actually also, I think, does put a light on the idea that we have a treasury that is far too powerful. We do need to...
Said every Prime Minister in history.
No, but this needs to... We do need to do something fundamental about the way we run our country. The Treasury have, obviously, its computer says no has been the argument to a succession of defence secretary.
But every other department says the same thing, of course.
But the headline figures, as Miriam rightly says, look at what's happening in health, look what's happening in PIP. Money is being found there, but not...
also just very...
security.
But also, just very briefly, I think that this does weaken Starmer up profoundly, and I think it'll be a lot harder for him to stand in a new leadership campaign.
Right, Mark, Jonathan, we'll speak to you again in the next hour, but first let's go and speak to Sophia Wensler, who has a quick news update.
Good morning, your headlines at 10:34. Sir Keir Starmer is facing fresh pressure after Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes followed John Healey in resigning over military funding. Meanwhile, the newly appointed Defence Secretary Dan Jarvis has arrived in Downing Street this morning. It says Sir Keir Starmer has insisted the defence plan will provide the resources the military needs. US President Donald Trump has said he cancelled planned strikes on Iran, claiming a deal is now close, saying Iran has agreed it will never have a nuclear weapon. The UK economy contracted by 0.1% in April as household finances began to feel the impact of the Iran war. A 14-year-old girl is due in court today charged with 3 counts of attempted murder after a knife attack on a school in Manchester. A boy and girl, both 14, and a 27-year-old male member of staff were stabbed at the Co-op Academy on Plant Hill Road in the Blakely area. Around 1 million young people will be offered the meningitis B vaccine before the new academic year. It follows a series of outbreaks. Those are the headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Well, coming up next, Baroness Casey says that children who were groomed, sexually abused and then prosecuted for crimes are still being failed. Maggie Oliver will be joining us next. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good morning, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, today is going to be the driest day of the week for many places, and it's going to be markedly warmer as well, but it's not looking totally dry and there is quite a breeze around. At the moment there is some rain around western parts, and that is feeding further eastwards, but it's breaking up as it goes, so many eastern parts staying largely dry, just a few spots of rain later on. Towards the northwest, particularly northern and western Scotland, here there will be plenty of blustery showers. Elsewhere, apart from a few spots of rain here and there, by the afternoon it's looking drier and brighter for many places, with temperatures higher than they have been recently. We're looking at highs around 23 or 24 Celsius towards the south-southeast. Into this evening, plenty more showery rain across much of Scotland, especially towards the northwest. Blustery winds as well to watch out for. But worth noting, the showers today, well, they're not looking as heavy or as thundery as many of the showers we've seen through this week. A few showers to end the day across perhaps parts of Northern Ireland, the far north of England as well, but across the rest of England and Wales, well, it's looking like a largely fine end to the day. Lots of clear skies, some late sunshine to look forward to as well. Overnight, a bit of a north-south split. Northern areas staying quite blustery, cloudy at times, and a fair bit of showery rain to come as well. Further south, it's a drier, clearer picture, but temperatures for most not really dropping a huge amount. A fairly mild night for many places, generally staying in double figures. Just a few prone spots, some sheltered glens perhaps of Scotland dropping into single digits. And then we stick with that north-south split through into Saturday, cloudier across northern parts, showery outbreaks of rain, perhaps edging a bit further southwards across more northern parts of England through the day, but none of it looks especially heavy. Central southern parts of England and Wales having a largely fine picture, plenty of sunshine, plenty of blue sky, and with that feeling relatively warm, even if temperatures on paper aren't too dissimilar to today. In fact, for some of us, it's going to be a touch fresher. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Britain, for the thousands of you who are becoming friends of GB News every week.
You're not only watching and listening to our programmes, you're becoming part of them too.
Good morning. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. On the M4 eastbound at junction 33, delays are caused by congestion. The A590 westbound in Cumbria has a 10-minute delay clearing by 11. In Kent, the A21 southbound is down to one lane between the A225 and A26. In Leeds, the A1M southbound has one lane closed between junctions 45 and 44 following a collision, with improvements expected by 11:15. And on the trains, major disruption continues on South Western Railway between Bournemouth and Weymouth, plus delays on Avanti West Coast between Nuneaton and Rugby. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Hello, it's 10:39. You're watching Britain's Newsroom with Charlie and Miriam.
Well, children who were groomed, sexually abused and then prosecuted for crimes including prostitution are still being failed. That's according to Baroness Louise Casey.
Yes, she was the author, of course, of that landmark grooming gangs report last year that led to a national inquiry being launched. She has said that the government's plans to pardon some victims do not go far enough. She's calling for all wrongful convictions to be reviewed and quashed.
Well, joining us now is the former detective constable and whistleblower, founder of the Maggie Oliver Foundation, Maggie Oliver. Maggie, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. What's your reaction to Louise Casey's intervention?
Good morning. She's absolutely right. I agree with every word she's said. As Charlie knows, I met with Louise Casey last year and took a group of survivors to meet with her in Manchester before she published her review. And once again, what we're seeing here is, a lack of real action to address the bigger issues here. In all honesty, you know, and I've been working in this field for actually 30 years. When I first joined GMP and I was going to children's homes, I was horrified as a mum of 4. I was horrified back then about how children were being criminalised when they were already so vulnerable. You know, they would kick off, or they would, you know, they'd be locked up for a public order offence. These are children who were being raped on a daily basis. And there was an insistence on focusing on their bad behaviour, which was really a result of the trauma and abuse they were suffering, rather than going after their abusers. So, but very few were actually charged with child prostitution.
Yeah.
Most of them were arrested for public order offences or minor criminality. I mean, Charlie knows, because we've spoken at length, you know, on the Rochdale case, which was like 15 years after I joined the police, there were girls there that I was supporting, and actually that I took to meet Stephen Watson to receive apologies, that had got long criminal records. When there were, I mean, I remember one, Daisy, that she told her story. You know, she'd been in a premises with half a dozen of her abusers who had burned her on a gas hob because she refused to comply with their demands, with a spoon that was heated up on the hob. She still has that scar till this day. She was locked up because the men said that she'd done it to herself. They went away scot-free. Now, those kinds of convictions should never have happened. So child prostitution offences were very rare.
Yeah.
And we are still seeing children being held today, arrested, because it's far easier to prosecute a vulnerable child than an organised networks of child abusers. And that's what we're seeing again, you know, a half-hearted attempt to tinker around the edges. So I'm really pleased that Louise Casey has come out and said this. I agree with every word. And the 2 stories in that piece in the BBC article, you know, Fiona, who Charlie knows really well, Jamie Lee, you know, we're working with both of them in the foundation, and I'm hoping that they're going to be part of the judicial review, because one of the key things that we're taking the government to court on is their failure to implement the recommendations of ICSA, one of those being banning of pain compliance techniques. This actually just makes our case so much stronger, because this shows so clearly how children are frightened of disclosing anything when they're in care, and there is no protection there for them. So, I mean, Charlie's done a lot of work, haven't you, Charlie, on this subject? So you have heard countless stories that have led to lives destroyed, because the consequences of these convictions are that child can't get a job in certain areas. That conviction stays with them forever.
Maggie,
so we need a lot of action.
Let's talk about the case of Jamie Lee, who I know will be happy for us to speak about this and what she endured. I mean, young girl from Oldham, her face was actually plastered on the local newspaper, you know, described as basically a cause of trouble and someone who needs to be chased out of town. At the time of that, you know, this is what the police were talking about her, and that's how she was described in the newspapers. You know, she was being abused by gangs. And so, you know, Louise Casey had those 12 recommendations last year. There's been action to some degree in all of them. Of course, the major ones people talk about are the inquiry and the police investigation. But on this particular recommendation, they've only really moved to get rid of those child prostitution charges. But for someone like Jamie Lee, who was forced into criminality and pushed into that, you know, form of offending due to exploitation, those answers just aren't there. And there are just countless other examples like that, aren't there, Maggie?
Oh, there are so many, Charlie. And, you know, I would actually not agree with you that action has been taken on the 20 ICSA recommendations.
No, the 12, the 12 from Baroness Casey's report last year is what I was saying.
Sorry, well, they've said they're going to do something about it, but we haven't seen that happen yet. And, you know, I always say, don't I, that the devil is in the details. So, yeah, they accepted what Baroness Casey has said in this particular issue, but then, you know, have watered it down to such an extent that it actually becomes a bit of a pointless exercise. Jamie Lee, I was with her about a month ago, and with Fiona. You know, they have had their lives completely destroyed by the lack of protection that the protective agencies offered towards them. I mean, you know Jade as well. You've met Jade very well. She actually went to prison. You know, she was a child victim. None of her abusers were ever prosecuted. She was locked up and convicted of inciting children into sexual activity when she was one of those children being abused. You know, the big headlines cover the reality of the lives that are destroyed by incompetence, by neglect, by corruption, by cover-ups. And we're still tiptoeing around the edges. I think a voice with the influence of Baroness Casey is the kind of voices that we need to continue to put pressure on the government. I think our JR, whether we win it or not, is another way of informing the country about what actually isn't going on. Words are so easy, but when you really look deep into the detail of these things, and this isn't a party political point because the Conservatives had many years to deal with it and they didn't. It is about neglect in our governments who are quite happy to throw money at things that don't affect children's lives. I mean, I won't go into all of that, but we still have a really inadequate system of protection for children
and
who
Maggie,
find themselves...
a long way still to go here, but Baroness Casey says that the government have taken the lazy option. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Just got to say the government did say that grooming victims with prosecutions could apply to the Independent Criminal Cases Review Commission to have those assessed individually. But as we both know, plenty of victims have done that and they've not had their cases reviewed. Maggie Oliver, we've got to leave it there, but thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. Good to hear from you as ever.
I don't really understand why the government won't do it. It doesn't cost anything. Bizarre. Well, moving on now. We've got lots more coming up on Britain's Newsroom, but first of all, here's the European holiday weather forecast.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Looking ahead to the weekend and across much of southern Europe, the weather's looking largely fine. Not totally dry, however. Across some parts of Greece, especially towards the south and around some of the Greek islands, there will be some showery outbreaks of rain around. 1 or 2 showers across parts of Italy, otherwise largely dry. Largely dry for much of Spain, just towards the west. Outbreaks of rain, these affecting Portugal too, but towards Madeira and the Canary Islands, it's looking dry here. More fine and at times hot weather to come into next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Veterinary surgeons and such as yourself, I mean, you're very, very highly trained, but it just feels so expensive when there's something wrong with your animal. And it does also seem that insurance doesn't cover the very things you need.
There's been huge advancements in veterinary medicine. 20 to 30 years ago, we had no CT scanners in practice. We had no MRI machines. Our blood tests were very rudimentary. And for that, you could do that very cheaply. Now we can offer you this incredibly high level of care that comes at a high cost. Everybody wants this extremely high level of care for their pet. Of course, you want the best for your pet. But there's nobody else to pay for that. So if you can be honest and say, I can't do that at that amount of money, we'll find you a way. Yeah. We will.
GB News, the People's Channel. GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Lovely to see them all looking rather laid back and informal, wasn't it?
Yes, you know, we're used to all of these grand royal events, and although this was undoubtedly the society wedding of the year, a very low-key event, they deliberately wanted to keep it as a private affair, as much as one can when one is a member of the royal family, of course. But it was a private ceremony, it was very intimate, and that's really the way that they've lived, that Peter Phillips has lived his life recently, and I think he wants to continue that. Interesting to note also that in this modern age, this is a blended family at this marriage, because they're both entering this as their second marriage. Of course, Peter Phillips previously married to Autumn Kelly, with whom he has 2 daughters, Savannah and Isla, who are 15 and 14. They were bridesmaids.
GB News, the People's Channel. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Dorothea, how does it feel being here today, joining other veterans?
It's marvellous, because for years after the war ended, nobody knew that women had even done anything during the war. And also, they suddenly discovered that, good heavens, women have got brains. They can think for themselves and for the country. And it was naturally assumed that everybody would willingly do their bit for England. And they would have. We had one purpose in life, which was to free the world from Nazism.
The People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 9 minutes to 11. You're watching Britain's Newsroom with Charlie and Miriam.
We have some breaking news to bring you that's just come into us in the last few moments. The celebrated British artist David Hockney has died, aged 88. His publicist has shared that news. His family have said that he passed away peacefully at home on Thursday. We also have a statement saying that the celebrated British artist David Hockney, one of the most important figures in contemporary art in both the 20th and 21st centuries, passed away peacefully at home on the 11th of June 2026, 1 month short of his 89th birthday.
Sad news. Got a lot of school children study his work, part of the art curriculum. Very sad news.
He's an iconic figure, no doubt about that. He will be for some time as well, I suspect.
Well, still ahead, Belfast awakens after a third night of protests as it's revealed that the asylum seeker charged with attempted murder was a policeman in his home country of Sudan. Dougie Beattie has more in the next hour.
Well, you're watching Britain's Newsroom, which is Britain's favourite morning show on GB News. We will be crossing to Belfast very shortly to join Dougie. Stay with us. Loads more coming after the break.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. A drier afternoon with some sunny spells around to come, but there will be further showers, particularly across far northern areas. That's because we're closer to this area of low pressure. Meanwhile, high pressure is starting to build in across more southern areas, but there is a waving front bringing some thicker cloud, at least through the first part of this afternoon. But it will start to brighten up from the west, particularly across parts of Wales and northern England, seeing plenty of sunshine too. Remaining quite cloudy though in the south and east, and showers and some quite brisk westerly winds will continue into this evening across the far north. Temperatures will climb towards the low 20s, 23 degrees in the south and east, feeling relatively warm in the sunshine for parts of the Midlands and parts of Wales as well into this evening. So a fairly fine end to the working week. There is a bit of a breeze, a westerly wind into this evening though, and further north into Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, there will be more cloud and some quite heavy showers across western and northern areas of Scotland in particular, and the winds remain quite strong here too this evening. Now, showers will continue across more northern areas into tonight. Elsewhere, it remains dry and clear. We could see some mist and fog developing across the far south and west by Saturday morning, but otherwise it's going to be a fairly clear night, which will allow temperatures to fall away a little bit lower than they have done the past couple of nights. So it's going to be a slightly fresher start to the day on Saturday, particularly across southern areas, but temperatures still around 11 or 12 degrees to start the weekend. And high pressure is building in, particularly across the south throughout this weekend. So there will be more sunshine than we've had so far this week and much less in the way of rain. But it's still going to be quite a wet and unsettled day for the far north of Scotland, in particular showers pushing in on a northerly breeze. So comparatively, it's going to be quite cool up here compared to elsewhere where temperatures climb into the 20s.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
GB loyalty points are here. They're our way of saying thank you for spending time with GB News. Through commenting on your say, voting in You Decide polls and shaping the debate, you can earn GB loyalty points. Unlock rewards, reach milestones and climb leaderboards. Don't just watch our programmes, come and be part of them. Get started by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/loyalty points.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace to Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Are you dreaming of a ton of tax-free cash this summer? We want to make that dream come true with a stunning £76,543 and 21 pence in cash to spend however you like. Put a new car on the drive or just relax in the knowledge that this year we've got your back. For a chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB21 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 26th of June. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pooled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter? So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics.
First we'll say, welcome to the UK. Oh, thank you.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
The Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong Tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
It's just before 11 a.m. on Friday, the 12th of June. This is live across the United Kingdom. You're watching Britain's Newsroom with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
The Prime Minister's leadership has been plunged into turmoil once more.
While the Defence Secretary John Healey and the Armed Forces Minister Al Khans have resigned from Sir Keir's government, accusing the Prime Minister of putting Britain in danger by failing to spend the money needed to defend the nation.
While speaking to GB News earlier this morning, Al Khans told us why he stepped down from his position.
I resigned for two reasons, really. The first one was I didn't think the funding settlement or the Defence Investment Plan was transformative enough, and the second one was because of the Legacy Act, and I want to make sure that we protect all our armed forces, including our veterans, once they have served. So we've got to get the balance right, but the first principle, unifying role of any government, is to protect the nation, and we need to do that properly.
So we're asking today, will the Prime Minister receive the message and increase defence spending?
We'll also be paying tribute to artist David Hockney, who has died at the age of 88. Hockney has been described as one of the most important figures in contemporary art in both the 20th and 21st centuries.
Elsewhere over the water, Belfast awakens after a third night of protests as it's been revealed that the asylum seeker charged with attempted murder was a policeman in his home country of Sudan.
And Britain's economy has contracted for the first time in 8 months. An ONS survey revealed that GDP shrank by 0.1% in April amid surging fuel prices linked to the Iran war.
Baroness Casey has spoken out today about her anger that children who were groomed, abused and prosecuted for crimes are still being failed 1 year after her landmark report.
And an NHS transgender clinic is set to close after a damning report found cross-sex drugs prescribed to 78 children were inappropriate and unsafe.
Flurry of sad news in the last 10 minutes. First with that sad news about David Hockney, but also the football manager Kenny Jackett. Just heard that he has passed away as well at the age of 64. So some sad news to bring you there. But of course, David Hockney, an absolutely iconic figure in art, Miriam.
And very well known to Britain's school children, a key staple of the curriculum. I remember helping my children with David Hockney-style pictures all the way through school. Very, very talented artist indeed.
Yeah, and just reflecting on his passing in the last few moments, obviously it brings to mind immediately some of the classic pieces that he has produced. We'll be talking about that in this next hour. There's the man, David Hockney, who has very sadly died, passed away yesterday on the 11th of June.
Well, lots more coming up on Britain's Newsroom this morning. We'd love to know what you think. Send your views and comments to gbnews.com/yoursay.
First, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Charlie, Miriam, thank you and good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. These are your headlines. Now, as you've been hearing that breaking news, British artist David Hockney has died at the age of 88, his publicist has announced today. Hockney was from Bradford, West Yorkshire. He died peacefully at his home yesterday, 1 month short of his 89th birthday. The painter was one of the most influential and recognisable British artists of the 20th and 21st century. Sir Keir Starmer is facing fresh pressure after Armed Forces Minister Al Khans followed John Healey in resigning over military funding. The former Defence Minister said he could not defend a level of investment he believes is inadequate to the threat Britain faces. Speaking to GB News this morning, Mr Khans said the first priority of the government should always be to protect the nation.
I resigned for two reasons, really. The first one was I didn't think the funding settlement or the Defence Investment Plan was transformative enough, and the second one was because of the Legacy Act, and I want to make sure that we protect all our armed forces, including our veterans, once they have served.
John Healey had already resigned as Defence Secretary, accusing the Prime Minister and Treasury of failing to properly fund the Defence Investment Plan. Number 10 has appointed Dan Jarvis as the new Defence Secretary. He was seen arriving at Downing Street this morning. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has insisted the defence plan will provide the resources the military needs. Reports have since emerged that the reason for capping defence spending is the government's commitment to net zero spending and the ballooning benefits bill. Donald Trump has said he cancelled planned strikes on Iran after claiming a new deal is now close. The US president said documents could be signed within days and that Iran has agreed it will never have a nuclear weapon. He says the Strait of Hormuz would reopen once any agreement is signed. It comes after the US confirmed strikes on several ships accused of transporting Iranian oil. However, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson told State TV that reports of an agreement were speculative and nothing has been finalised. The economy shrank in April as household finances began to feel the impact of the Iran war. The UK's gross domestic product contracted by 0.1% during the month, according to the Office for National Statistics. It's the first time the economy has contracted since August last year, and it's a sharp pullback from growth of 0.3% in March and 0.4% in February. Chancellor Rachel Reeves acknowledged the war in the Middle East was hitting the economy, saying this is not a war we wanted or joined, but one that will have an impact at home. Protests in Northern Ireland passed peacefully last night after 2 days of unrest sparked by the stabbing of Stephen Ogilvie by a Sudanese man. The police service of Northern Ireland said extra officers, including mutual aid officers from other UK forces, had been deployed across Northern Ireland last night amid concerns about further violence. 30-year-old Hadi Al-Adid appeared in court on Wednesday, charged with the attempted murder of 44-year-old Mr Ogilvie, who lost an eye and suffered injuries to his back and head in the attack. It has since been reported Al-Adid served as a policeman in Khartoum. A 14-year-old girl is due in court today, charged with 3 counts of attempted murder after a knife attack at a school in Manchester. A boy and girl, both aged 14, and a 27-year-old male member of staff were stabbed at the Co-op Academy on Plant Hill Road in the Blakely area. More than 70 people have been evacuated from their homes after a large fire tore through a warehouse in northwest London. 150 firefighters and 25 fire engines were deployed to the scene on Oxgate Lane in Brent, following more than 70 emergency calls from the public. The London Fire Brigade confirmed this morning that the blaze has now been brought under control. Around 1 million young people will be offered the meningitis B vaccine before the new academic year. The programme will cover Year 13 pupils as well as people under 25, starting university or some residential further education courses this autumn. They will be offered 2 doses, with the first from July and the second in August. The government says it is acting now after a series of outbreaks, including one in Kent earlier this year, which left 2 teenagers dead. A new natural history GCSE is one step closer to being taught in schools. The qualification would see pupils study climate change, conservation, wildlife in the UK and the impact humans have on the natural world. Students would also carry out fieldwork outdoors, studying places such as parks, coastlines and local habitats. Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'll have more for you in half an hour.
Hello, good morning and welcome. You're watching and listening to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Charlie Peters and Miriam Cates.
Right, lots of you getting in touch on gbnews.com/your say, sharing your reaction to David Hockney's death. Plenty of tributes in there for that. We'll be coming back to that with full reaction to his legacy and, of course, his greatness as an artist with those iconic Los Angeles swimming pools in a moment.
Well, our top story today, former Defence Minister Al Carnes has told GB News that we need to defend our nation properly following his resignation last night.
Yes, he called on the government to consider making cuts to welfare in order to help fund defence, and while failing to rule out a potential bid for the Labour leadership and the keys to number 10.
And in the last few moments, the Prime Minister has met with the newly appointed Defence Secretary, Dan Jarvis, at Downing Street.
Well, let's speak now to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who joins us now. Chopper, this is a moment of great peril for Sir Keir Starmer, but we've been saying that quite a lot recently, haven't we?
Yes, we have, but losing 7 ministers in 4 weeks is a moment of great peril. I'm in Downing Street right now. The PM is in the building behind me. We have seen Dan Jarvis leave. He, of course, is the new Defence Secretary. But frankly, what is the PM for in power if it's not to keep us safe? Now, he makes a lot of play about being on the world stage, the threat from Russia directly, the threat indirectly from China. He makes these points almost to justify spending money, but he hasn't backed those words up with money. George Robertson's report came out well over a year ago, the former head of NATO and a former Labour Defence Secretary. He was frustrated. He said earlier this year to the Financial Times, is it welfare or warfare? Which matters more to the ruling party, the Labour government? Al Carnes, he resigned late last night following, of course, John Healey, who went yesterday. And John Healey's words were striking. He made clear that the PM couldn't find the money, and in fact the money was not going to come from the Treasury. You might wonder politically why on earth the Prime Minister didn't side with his Defence Secretary against the Chancellor, because of course that would put him on the side of his rhetoric, of his language about defence. But earlier today I spoke to Al Carnes here in Westminster and asked him what he thought had gone wrong with this government's priorities.
Clear that we need more into defence. I've been clear that the defence investment plan needs to be more transformative, but we've got to be really careful of making sure that the nation can get a good day's work, can get paid for a good day's work, that they can have a secure NHS, they have good schooling, good public services, and a lot of that is not about cutting the things that affect your lives and everybody else's lives on a day-to-day basis. So we've got to get the balance right. But the first principle, unifying role of any government, is to protect the nation, and we need to do that properly.
Now, we are expecting, we could be hearing from the Prime Minister at some point today. We'll bring that, any words he says, to you as soon as we get it. But that was Al Carnes there, not saying that he wouldn't be standing to be leader if a vacancy occurs. Of course, the Prime Minister has made very clear he wants to fight to stay on as the leader, and in fact his name goes forward to members if there is a leadership battle. So we are approaching what I think will be a critical point this time next week in the wake of the various by-elections happening around the country. Will there be a candidate stepping forward to take on Sir Keir Starmer? Get ready, it's going to be quite a bumpy ride.
Chris, in his very hard-hitting resignation letter, Al Carnes gave two reasons really for his resignation. One about the Defence Investment Plan, but also calling into question the Northern Ireland Veterans Bill. And we've had a reaction from one of the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner, David Johnston. He's published a letter which is now on X, really implying that he supports Al Carnes and that many veterans thought that Al Carnes should have resigned sooner. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, Al Carnes told me in an interview he'd looked at resigning twice previously about the Veterans Bill. He has served with distinction in various theatres around the world on behalf of UK forces. When I was with him earlier, he made a point of thanking the police as they walked past for keeping us safe. He's somebody who understands and knows the value of public service. He had looked at resigning twice over the Veterans Bill. He was trying to change it from within, because frankly, why resign if you can change things from within? That obviously wasn't working, and it seems that this issue with the Defence Investment Plan, only 10 or 13 billion offered of the annual uplift compared to 28 billion wanted from the armed forces. That was the final straw, and he also felt he couldn't really defend what was left of the Veterans Bill in the House of Commons from the dispatch box, where of course it's incumbent on ministers to always tell the truth to Parliament. He couldn't do that, he's walked away, but he made very clear, I certainly took it from talking to him earlier today outside Parliament, that if there was a leadership contest, Al Carnes will step forward.
Much for that update, Christopher Hope. Right, well, let's speak now to the author of that letter, the Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner and also former Army reservist David Johnston. David, thanks very much for coming to speak to us. This is quite a bold intervention, saying that you appreciate that some veterans felt as though Al Carnes should have resigned sooner over this Legacy Act, but he wanted to make change from within. Do you think change is now more likely now that he's out of government?
Well, good morning. I spoke to my Commissioner colleagues, Susie and James, this morning, and while we were saddened by this development, we recognise and understand the very principled decision that Al has taken to resign as Minister of Armed Forces, and we would like firstly just to place on record our thanks to Al for all that he did for veterans, both as his time as the Min VP as well then as the Armed Forces Minister. Look, as commissioners, we share his frustrations over not just the Defence Investment Plan, but particularly the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill. And many veterans quite rightly feel this government is failing to understand the corrosive nature of lawfare that veterans are being subjected to.
And what's your view of the new Defence Secretary, Dan Jarvis? Has he taken a position on this Veterans Bill? Will you be supporting him in his new role?
I'll certainly support any government minister that tries to go into bat for veterans, and as he does that, I'm quite happy to engage with him. The reality is, and this is speaking personally now, in recent months some veterans have criticised Al Carnes for not resigning sooner. Some even questioned his integrity, which I felt was unfair. But I know more than most just how hard Al tried to effect change from within. I encouraged him to ignore some of the critics and to stay in post as long as he felt he could influence decision makers. And unfortunately, the reason we're talking today is that Al reached the point that he felt he could no longer make any change to the Troubles Bill in particular. He wasn't being listened to, and therefore he has made the decision that he has made. It's obviously up for every other government minister to do what they think is best for them.
David, I think we've got time for just one more question. We heard from Al Carnes this morning. He spoke to GBNews. He said it felt as though this bill was rewriting history and actually that it was playing to Republicans and Sinn Féin. Is that a concern you've heard from plenty of other veterans? And do you think the government might be pressured into taking a different approach on this bill now?
Absolutely. I would concur with Al when he has said that, and I think it was remarkable when you read some of the detail in this letter where he makes very clear that the government has a duty, particularly to support those that have served, and he feels that unfortunately right now the government is failing those veterans that have served. And he also makes it very clear that the Troubles Bill, as it is currently, is not fit for purpose. So it's a very serious situation, and I think that this will cause great concern to op-banner veterans and veterans right throughout the UK, and indeed current serving members of particularly the Special Forces who are left with this uncertainty about will a future government defend them if they follow orders lawfully, and that is a big challenge for our armed forces community.
Well, David Johnston, Army veteran, Northern Ireland Veterans Commissioner and former Army reservist, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Charlie, what concerns me about all this discussion about defence, it's absolutely vital that we have it and whether or not defence is underfunded. But I do worry about the impact on morale in the armed forces. That they hear all these discussions. We've heard commentators say we don't have a navy anymore, which is obviously an exaggeration. But how is that playing out actually on the ground with people who are serving us?
Yeah, I think there's probably quite a lot of frustration inside the Royal Navy when people were very quick to attack the HMS Dragon situation. Al Carnes, you have a lot of views on his record as a minister, but one thing he's said that is completely right is that we've got the best personnel in the world. We just got to give them the right equipment to do the job that they need to do. HMS Dragon, I think it was remarkable that it got out as quick as it did, considering how poor a state our destroyer fleet is. Just 6 ships for a maritime nation of our size with those many global commitments. It was, laid up in dock, and it got out pretty quickly.
Yeah, within a week, I think, wasn't it?
I don't think another navy could have done that. It's just a shame that they're in that devastating situation they have to recover from all the time. So I think, morale was low and people were knocking that a bit too aggressively, calling it HMS Drag On.
Yeah.
I don't think they were too impressed.
One headline. Well, coming up next, President Donald Trump has scrapped plans for a third night of airstrikes on Iran after declaring that the final details of a peace memorandum have been agreed.
We'll be going through that and more with fan favourite Jonathan Liss and Mark Field, former Foreign Office Minister. This is former Minister. This is Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. See you in a moment.
the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At the stroke of midnight, the news doesn't stop, and neither do we.
Day in, day out. Forget stuffy late night TV shows. We're giving you a front row ticket to the centre of the political universe.
Because breaking news doesn't wait for the morning.
And neither do we. Join us for one of the most controversial and volatile times of politics in human history.
A very big story.
Big story over here.
You won't get this anywhere else. The Late Show live at midnight, every night.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. It's 22 minutes past 11.
Now, just a reminder of that breaking news from the last hour. The celebrated British artist David Hockney has died aged 88. Now, his family say that he passed away peacefully at home on Thursday.
Hockney has been described as one of the most important figures in contemporary art in both the 20th and 21st centuries.
Well, let's speak to artist David Henty for some reaction to the passing of David Hockney. David Henty, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, lots of iconic pieces from the 20th century come to mind, but what's your immediate reaction to David Hockney's death?
Good morning. No, just in shock. He was a fantastic artist, very innovative. And he tried to lift the curtains back, draw the curtains back on lots of different art and techniques. And I have his book here, right in front of me, which is like a Bible, the David Hockney book, The Secret Knowledge, which I've gained lots of stuff from. Yeah, I'm sad and shocked by his passing.
David, I'm just looking at some of the images of his most famous pictures here. I'm not an artist at all. I'm probably using completely the wrong vocabulary to describe it, but very bright, vibrant colours, very, very joyful pictures. How would you describe his style and how did it develop over his career?
I was lucky enough to see some of his pictures in a museum in Manchester. They weren't on show, and that was his early work from the 60s. But when he went to California, he developed into his bright style, the swimming pools, which he's best known for. Yeah, and he used acrylic paint, which is you know, and there's a brighter sort of colours, and yeah, no, he was a great artist, and he changed art, and he's very innovative.
But David, speaking of that innovation, I think a moment ago we just showed an image of David Hockney in front of the Queen Elizabeth II window, the stained glass window that he designed at Westminster Abbey. I hope we can bring that picture back up of David Hockney in front of that window. There it is there.
Yeah,
it's on the north transept next to the more traditional stained glass windows, and it is extremely striking, and it points to the range as an artist that he had.
Yeah, that's a lovely blue he's got in the background there. Yeah, the colours he used were just so vibrant. I think, like himself, you know, when he used to dress up with his glasses and his hat and stuff, and very colourful character. They'll be sadly missed, I'm sure. They're very, very sad day.
Right, David Henty, artist, thank you so much for your reaction and for sharing your thoughts at that sad moment.
Well, we're joined now in the studio by the journalist and commentator Jonathan Liss and former Foreign Office Minister Mark Field. Jonathan, I know you're a particular fan of David.
I'm a massive art lover, and Hockney, I think, was one of the last of a generation of post-war artists who actually revolutionised Bashar. You had Lucien Freud, Francis Bacon, Frank Auerbach, and he's the last survivor of that sort of pack. Very different styles, all of them. But one thing that strikes you about Hockney is just the versatility and the range. I mean, his career started in the 1950s. I went to one of the retrospectives where you saw one of his first pictures from, I think, what's like 1953 or something like that. And then he was painting until the last moment. There's an exhibition on right now, actually, about paintings from the last year. Wow. And there was a huge retrospective in Paris 2 years ago where you saw the latest iPad paintings. Because another thing about him was that he just grasped new technology and he would just paint in Normandy and also in Yorkshire, just the same kind of sort of row of trees, for example, in the different times of the seasons with these incredible colours, using that new technology in a way that very few of his contemporaries were willing or able to do. So the range and an amazing portraitist, fantastic with collage, just the breadth of him. I think it will not be matched anytime soon.
And Markfield, will you be jumping into a Los Angeles swimming pool in honour of the splash?
It might be the only way forward. And listen, I have to say, I'm not as knowledgeable on these matters as Jonathan, but I was at one time, very, very briefly, and it wasn't a match made in heaven, the culture spokesman for the Conservative Party.
There was one.
I was going to say, not bad for a Philistine. No, but on a serious level, I think one of the great things about Hockney was that there is almost a golden thread through a lot of his work, and you can see distinctive, although the style changed, there are distinctive patterns going back, as Jonathan says, 65 years. But also he was very, very proud Yorkshireman. Yeah. Actually, though he spent much of his life out in California, he was a man, he was brought up in Bradford, and you see that, again, being in a place like Bridlington, which is a great colour and great the nature that is around on that North Sea coast, and that also plays, I think, a part in his art.
Also, proud libertarian, was defiantly pro-tobacco his entire life. Yeah. I don't like smoking myself, but I firmly believe that people have the right to smoke and to buy cigarettes, etc., and that is something else that I share with him.
Do you know what, folks? 88, pretty excellent run, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not everyone...
Yeah. Particularly when you're on a smoking habit.
Yes. And working till the last moment.
That was my hint there, Jonathan. Thanks for spelling it out.
Thank you, Charlie. I'm not very subtle, as you know, Charlie.
Right, shall we move on, Miriam? What do you want to talk about next?
Well, shall we talk about Belfast? I mean, so many issues brought up over the last week. Obviously, the issue of asylum, of illegal immigration, but also reminiscing about the troubles, really, and the kind of undercurrents of violence and sectarianism that are still in Northern Ireland.
I think what's always worth remembering, particularly here in England, in London, there's a view, the troubles were all over, after the Good Friday Agreement in 1999. Well, where did all of the former troublemakers all go? In many ways, both elements from the IRA and the UVF went into protection rackets, into drug running, into all of this, and so you're seeing individuals who are playing part in that lower level of criminality, perhaps on the streets on both sides of this. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, and of course, it also plays to all the issues around, how open that border. That was the deal that was made in post-Brexit, but that now has led to all sorts of problems.
That's the footage we took at the Sandy Nose roundabout. There I am filming very briefly on Wednesday evening as they push forward after a Department for Infrastructure tanker was set on fire there. And Jonathan, a lot of people we spoke to basically told us. We've been angry about this for a long time. Nothing's been done about issues about migration properly. Peace doesn't work, and that's why they're doing this. And suddenly we're talking about it. It's frustrating for those people that they feel as though they need to act.
Charlie, Northern Ireland is one of the whitest places in Europe. The idea that Northern Ireland is being overrun by...
No one said they're being overrun.
No, but then you say, what kind of problem is it? I mean, when you see Ugandan, see a Ugandan nurse who's basically been burnt out of her home and she manages to save her uniform because she has to go to work. Yeah. I mean, I just don't understand how we can possibly dignify or legitimise these people's concerns. I'm sorry. We can't keep playing into the hands of rioters. These people are thugs. A lot of people it might be motivated by racism. It might be motivated by the fact that we see in riots across the world because they're fun. They give something people to do. They give people a sense of community, ironically enough. And if you see an orgy of violence, well, orgies can be fun sometimes if you're of a particular disposition. And that is what we see. But to say, well, they have legitimate concerns about black people moving into the neighbourhoods, no, I'm sorry, it's not a legitimate concern.
I think, Jonathan, we have to be careful what we say because a 30-year-old Sudanese asylum seeker has been charged with attempted murder. Yeah. That is one person, but I think a lot of people will be living in those communities in Belfast, in North Belfast, where that attack happened and saying, well, one's too many. If you have someone who's had to cross the border...
And how many white people commit crimes in Northern Ireland? There's been unrest on the streets of Dublin as well, going back some years. And in many ways, because of the open border, significant numbers have gone from the south to the north.
What you just said is so important, but how about other sort of homegrown knife attackers? You know, that's the sort of language that's being used in Northern Ireland at the moment. And speaking to people there, as I have done in the last few days, they see that as a distraction designed to deflect and shut down...
distraction, Charlie?
Because it is. It's moving away from a specific issue into a different...
But, why? But the point is that what we're talking about here is crime being viewed through a racialised lens, except when it's a white person doing it. Look at the femicide in Northern Ireland, the worst place in the UK to be a woman. Jonathan, but it's not whataboutery. Why are we only dignifying violence when it's a black person doing the crime?
There are already discussions about them, but when you look at your country as a home, there are obviously problems in every home. But when someone comes into your house and problems happen after that, it might spark a wider distraction.
But why is one black person acting on behalf of all black people when we don't ever think about one white person acting on behalf of all white people?
I just don't think that's what's happening, Jonathan. There are obviously different political and policy reactions that happen when asylum is into it, and I think we're going to see those discussions play out, and I think policy will change as a consequence of this situation.
Well, I just think it's that I don't think any kind of collective punishment is the right answer to this. The vast majority of migrants are law-abiding people who want to contribute to their communities.
Mark, Jonathan, thanks for your time. What's next, Miriam?
Thanks, Charlie.
We're going to have your 60-second news update with Sophia Wenster.
Good morning. Your headlines at 11:32. British artist David Hockney has died at the age of 88, his publicist has announced. Hockney from Bradford in West Yorkshire died peacefully at his home yesterday, 1 month short of his 89th birthday. The painter was one of the most influential and recognisable British artists of the 20th and 21st century. Sir Keir Starmer is facing fresh pressure after Armed Forces Minister Al Khan's followed John Healey in resigning over military funding. Meanwhile, the newly appointed Defence Secretary, Dan Jarvis, has arrived in Downing Street this morning, while Sir Keir Starmer has insisted the defence plan will provide the resources the military needs. US President Donald Trump has said he cancelled planned strikes on Iran, claiming a deal is now close, saying Iran has agreed it will never have a nuclear weapon. The UK economy contracted by 0.1% in April as household finances began to feel the impact of the Iran war. All asylum seekers staying at the Bell Hotel in Essex have been removed. The site became a flashpoint for protests over asylum accommodation last year. Epping Forest District Council says the Home Office has now cleared the hotel, but some staff remain on site. Those are the headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, on Nation Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Coming up next on Britain's Newsroom, an NHS transgender clinic is set to close after a damning report found that cross-sex drugs prescribed to 78 children were inappropriate and unsafe.
This is Britain's Newsroom, only on GB News. See you in a moment.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. A drier afternoon with some sunny spells around to come, but there will be further showers, particularly across far northern areas. That's because we're closer to this area of low pressure. Meanwhile, high pressure is starting to build in across more southern areas, but there is a waving front bringing some thicker cloud, at least through the first part of this afternoon. But it will start to brighten up from the west, particularly across parts of Wales and northern England, seeing plenty of sunshine too. Remaining quite cloudy though in the south and east, and showers and some quite brisk westerly winds will continue into this evening across the far north. Temperatures will climb towards the low 20s, 23 degrees in the south and east, feeling relatively warm in the sunshine for parts of the Midlands and parts of Wales as well into this evening. So a fairly fine end to the working week. There is a bit of a breeze, a westerly wind into this evening though, and further north into Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, there will be more cloud and some quite heavy showers across western and northern areas of Scotland in particular, and the winds remain quite strong here too this evening. Now, showers will continue across more northern areas into tonight. Elsewhere, it remains dry and clear. We could see some mist and fog developing across the far south and west by Saturday morning, but otherwise it's going to be a fairly clear night, which will allow temperatures to fall away a little bit lower than they have done the past couple of nights. So it's going to be a slightly fresher start to the day on Saturday, particularly across southern areas, but temperatures still around 11 or 12 degrees to start the weekend. And high pressure is building in, particularly across the south throughout this weekend. So there will be more sunshine than we've had so far this week and much less in the way of rain. But it's still going to be quite a wet and unsettled day for the far north of Scotland. In particular, showers pushing in on a northerly breeze. So comparatively, it's going to be quite cool up here compared to elsewhere where temperatures climb into the 20s.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
As soon as it hits 11 and the headlines come in,
Late Edition brings you the breaking news from all the front pages.
because the news is going to happen.
So get a head start today.
Patrick Christie's tonight, Late Edition.
Alex Armstrong tonight, Late Edition. From 11 o'clock every night.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. It's 23 minutes to 12.
Now, an NHS GP practice has been ordered to stop prescribing transgender treatments to 78 children after investigators raised serious concerns over their care.
Doctors involved have been referred to the General Medical Council, with the report finding that they were not professionally competent to take responsibility for the prescribing of the medication.
Well, joining us now is the co-founder of Biology in Medicine, who's also a GP, Alice Hodkinson. Alice, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Tell us more about this report.
So I think it just shows up the utter failure of so many organisations in actually preventing the harm to these poor children. So this is a doctor, Dr. Sam Hall, who is a trans-identifying woman. So she's a woman who believes that she's a man, and she has a beard, and she looks, you know, superficially quite male. But she's a trans rights activist who's gone and taken her beliefs into her practice and is now has been giving hormones to children and young adults without any concern for the actual safety. I mean, it's been a complete failure of regulation throughout.
Now, the NHS withdrew these cross-sex hormones some time ago now, said they weren't safe, they weren't evidenced. Tell us what these cross-sex hormones do to children and what the long-term effect is.
Yes, so we've got male and female hormones. We have women, the female hormones are known as estrogen and progesterone, although we do have some testosterone, that testosterone being the male hormone, which, but men also have some estrogen as well. If you give high doses of the wrong hormone to somebody, then yes, so in men, if you give them estrogen, or in boys, you will change the fat distribution, they will develop breasts. And in women, of course, if you give them testosterone, they get the beards, their voice will break, and they'll get the muscle development. But those are the superficial appearances. But this does not change one's sex. You don't change your body type. And then, of course, you get the harms of all these, like you get clotting disorders, you get eye and kidney and brain changes. Mental health often gets worse with these, and we have evidence of that.
We know that one of the GPs involved in this, it's understood that they have been suspended. But do you think action is going to be taken appropriately in response to this report for this care and what was provided down in Brighton?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because concerns were raised in 2020, 2021, and yet the GMC did not investigate initially, and neither did NHS Sussex. And it's only really once some parents started threatening with legal action or took legal action that anyone paid any attention to this.
So what will happen to these children now? Because some of them will have started down this irreversible route. I mean, these changes are permanent that you spoke about. What recourse is there for them?
Well, I think what's happening is I understand that letters have gone out to the families to say that the hormones are going to be withdrawn. But actually, you know, they are stuck with these changes, as you say. And NHS England is supposed to be commissioning a detransition service. We asked a question about it at the latest board meeting, and I'm yet to find out when that's going to happen, because these and lots of other people are going to be needing those services. And it's not just the 78 children that we've heard of. That's only within a 3-year period. What about the ones before? And what about the young adults that have also been damaged? Because the cross-sex hormones do not become safe at the age of 18.
Of course, this has followed the wider Tavistock scandal we've seen exposed over recent years. Do you think that medics more generally, are waking up now to the harms of the transgender ideology and the medical implications? Or are we still seeing these views quite embedded within, well, certainly the BMA we're seeing on a regular basis?
The BMA is not happy about the reduction of the withdrawal of cross-sex hormones even for children, but sadly within the Royal Colleges you still see some that they're not accepting these harms,
which is very worrying based on a profession that should be scientific and evidence-based.
Absolutely. And we recently had the Levy review, which was looking at adult services, and that showed how awful those services were too. But the answer, Levy's answer, was that we should be doing more of it and faster and getting it into the GP side. And obviously this is just adding to the harms to people.
Now, Alice, the clinic has said it was previously confident that any young patients under the age of 18, that they were being assessed in accordance with good medical practice. It's also defended the prescribing of hormones to under 18s, but they say is based on an informed consent pathway. They say that sets out the risks and potential side effects and both the reversible and irreversible effects of hormone therapy. What is your reaction to that?
Well, yes, so Sam Hall's very clear about using this informed consent model, which appears to mean you demand, I deliver. And this is without the usual medical safeguards for things like evidence, safety, ethics and law. And, you know, we actually have rules within the medical profession about what you should and shouldn't do. And the thing is that these are turning, these hormones actually damage the healthy body and turn people from healthy children, healthy young adults into patients for life.
Dr. Alice Hodkinson, thank you so much for coming in and joining us in the studio this morning.
Right, well, coming up next here on Britain's Newsroom, this is a major story north of the border because a pair of Bulgarian siblings have been found guilty of an attack on 2 schoolgirls in Dundee. That sparked a viral Axe video. Our Scotland reporter Tony Maguire has that story. You won't want to miss that one.
But first of all, if you're in search of some holiday sun, here's the forecast for our top European destinations.
looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Looking ahead to the weekend and across much of southern Europe, the weather's looking largely fine. Not totally dry, however. Across some parts of Greece, especially towards the south and around some of the Greek islands, there will be some showery outbreaks of rain around. 1 or 2 showers across parts of Italy, otherwise largely dry. Largely dry for much of Spain, just towards the west. Outbreaks of rain, these affecting Portugal too, but towards Madeira and the Canary Islands, it's looking dry here. More fine and at times hot weather to come into next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I'm a bit worried about the future of the biscuit because it seems that people aren't really drinking tea in this country anymore. And I think you really need a cup of tea with a biscuit, but we're all coffee drinkers these days.
Yeah, I mean, this might be a bit controversial, but I like a cup of coffee with a biscuit. But so I think it's fine. I think it's just, you know, things can kind of develop and change, and that's okay. But I think what doesn't change is that biscuits are such a sort of important part of the kind of bedrock of our culture. I mean, we eat more biscuits as a nation than any other nation by some margin. So, you know, and I think they're about sharing and connection as well. You know, that people taking a bit of time out, you know, for tea and biscuits or coffee and biscuits. You know, that's part of what it's all about.
GB News, the People's Channel. Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Clearly, it's a terrible loss of revenue for Mr. Bezos there, but you know, I guess it's part and parcel of the move forward to try to determine what possible anomalies there are.
Yes, it's part of the game, unfortunately, in rocketry and spaceflight in general. It was actually going to launch 48 satellites for Amazon next week, which obviously isn't going to happen. More serious than that, though, however, is the damage that's been caused to the launch site.
So what? We can't do anything when we get to any of these planets anyway. We're just out there going, hey, and then we come back.
No. We could do an awful lot of work. There's a lot of research work to be done on the surface of the moon by scientists who can look at the evolution and development of the solar system, the evolution of the Earth, how the Earth actually formed initially.
GB News, the People's Channel. GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I've been an oncologist consultant for over 45 years, so I've seen it all. When we started 45 years ago, everybody got chemotherapy after getting a diagnosis of breast cancer if there was to reduce the risk of it coming back. And then what we've seen over the years, and this is really the culmination of years of effort, tests that predict what's going to happen. They analyze the molecular composition of the cancer, very sophisticated analysis based on DNA and genes to predict what's going to happen. So only the women that are at the highest risk actually need to have the chemotherapy. And everyone is really delighted with this British trial in London's University College Hospital. What the trial showed is that once you actually get the diagnosis from this sophisticated test, you don't need to have chemotherapies.
GB News.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. Now, a pair of Bulgarian siblings have been found guilty of an attack on 2 schoolgirls, which then sparked a viral Axe video last summer.
Ilya Belov, aged 22, was found guilty of making sexual remarks to a group of girls between the age of 12 and 14 in Dundee before grabbing and pushing one of them to the ground.
Well, this sparked a major reaction last year, but the court process has now concluded. And let's get more with our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, fill us in on the details on this case.
Yes, I mean, this case, back when it started and that video surfaced, it was kind of the Scottish arm of that summer of discontent that we all remember living through last year. Now, the 2 Bulgarian siblings at the centre of this, they were found guilty of assaulting 4 girls in Dundee, and it did get that international attention. Ilya Belov, he was 22, he was found guilty of making sexual remarks to the group of girls. The court heard how Belov told the girls girls, hello sexy, I'll show you a good time. Now this obviously resulted in the girls calling him a creep, which was when the assault became physical. He struck one of the girls' heads and she hit it off a handrail and then pushed her to the ground. An anonymous under-16 witness had said she was dead angry at getting these remarks. Sheriff Tim Nevin-Smith, he said the girls were eloquent witnesses, rejected Belov's self-serving defence and told Belov that it was his comments that triggered the entire episode. Nadezhda Belova, his sister, 20, also admitted previously in the trial of assaulting one of the 13-year-old girls by pulling her hair and dragging her to the ground. Now, the infamous video that went viral with one of the girls showing an axe was really divisive at the time. It really split opinion. A lot of people came out in support of the two Bulgarian siblings, saying that there was a far-right misinformation campaign against them. Others accused that, had said that the girls in fact showed you how the state of the country, and that was, for example, Elon Musk's input. He said that if this is kind of where we have to do now, then how shocking that was. But interestingly, originally the police themselves, they criticised the misinformation around the siblings, and in fact even ex-First Minister Hamza Yusuf called it far-right BS. But one of the girls' mothers, after the sentencing, has spoke to The Sun. She had said that the girls had tried to get their story across the whole time. They've been telling the truth the whole time, and in fact people were so focused on the axe that they weren't listening at all. So the two siblings will be sentenced in August, but indeed that very much draws a line over whether it was misinformation or indeed a violent act by two Bulgarian siblings.
Thank you very much for that report, Tony Maguire. Yeah, just remarkable, Miriam, to reflect on the reaction at the time when this happened. Police Scotland said there was misinformation being shared on social media. They said where a Bulgarian couple were approached by youths in Dundee. Well, we now know the truth of the matter, don't we? John Swinney, the First Minister, he accused Elon Musk of spreading misinformation on that Dundee girl weapon incident, as it was described in the press at the time. And the police said that the information given didn't fully reflect the situation. Well, we now know, of course, that that's the case, because the information given didn't fully reflect how those girls were victims in that case. People talked about it whipping up disorder and social cohesion being threatened. No, actually, what was being said was correct. Those girls were victims.
Yeah, and we're seeing this more and more, aren't we, where an incident happens, but the conversation shifts to what's happening online and who said what and who's posted what, rather than tackling the causes of what's happened. And, it's happening in Northern Ireland right now.
And while I'm sitting next to one of the key defenders of the Online Safety Act,
a
in
small
Miriam
section
Cates,
of it,
I'd just like to say that Minister Liz Kendall, they're going to lay in Parliament an update to the Online Safety Act next week to require services to get rid of those using social media to incite violence and disorder. Could that mean that truthful posts that were done last August of the situation in Dundee could be removed? We shall see.
Well, that's all Charlie's got time for. You'll be pleased to know up next is Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Dawn.
And the slow-motion implosion of Keir Starmer's government continues. 2 ministerial resignations, one from the Cabinet. The fallout is only just starting to reverberate.
Yes, and also we're talking about the councils that are banning people hanging England football flags up. You won't believe the excuse they're giving for it.
Well, all of that after your weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. A drier afternoon with some sunny spells around to come, but there will be further showers, particularly across far northern areas. That's because we're closer to this area of low pressure. Meanwhile, high pressure is starting to build in across more southern areas, but there is a waving front bringing some thicker cloud at least through the first part of this afternoon. But it will start to brighten up from the west, particularly across parts of Wales and northern England, seeing plenty of sunshine too. Remaining quite cloudy though in the south and east, and showers and some quite brisk westerly winds will continue into this evening across the far north. Temperatures will climb towards the low 20s, 23 degrees in the south and east, feeling relatively warm in the sunshine for parts of the Midlands and parts of Wales as well into this evening. So a fairly fine end to the working week. There is a bit of a breeze, a westerly wind into this evening though, and further north into Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, there will be more cloud and some quite heavy showers across western and northern areas of Scotland in particular, and the winds remain quite strong here too this evening. Now, showers will continue across more northern areas into tonight. Elsewhere, it remains dry and clear. We could see some mist and fog developing across the far south and west by Saturday morning, but otherwise it's going to be a fairly clear night, which will allow temperatures to fall away a little bit lower than they have done the past couple of nights. So it's going to be a slightly fresher start to the day on Saturday, particularly across southern areas, but temperatures still around 11 or 12 degrees to start the weekend. And high pressure is building in, particularly across the south throughout this weekend. So there will be more sunshine than we've had so far this week and much less in the way of rain. But it's still going to be quite a wet and unsettled day for the far north of Scotland, in particular showers pushing in on a northerly breeze. So comparatively, it's going to be quite cool up here compared to elsewhere where temperatures climb into the 20s.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
£76,543 and 21 pence in tax-free cash could be yours this summer. That's totally tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. And remember, because it's totally tax-free cash, you'll get to keep every single penny. For a chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB21 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 26th of June. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pooled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana